Hi, folks. This is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, one of the things I've thought of, I think of a lot of things, but I thought of that we don't talk a lot about. But in one of my other reports, I talked about the economic impact of hunting, and why do people fish? Why do they hunt? And I look back at the history of fishing, and I think it's important to remember that it was a vital part of human beings' life for centuries and centuries. I mean, it was a part of how we ate, how we survived, was in hunter-gatherers, in being hunters and gatherers. And under the hunter classification is fishing. In today's world, we don't do that as much. But, you know, I remember a conversation with an Amish guy that I talked to recently. And he had spent all day out fishing, and he told me about catching this northern pike and how, of course, he was taking that home. You've heard people complain, oh, the Amish are out and they catch all these fish and they keep them and so forth, and it hurts our fishery. Well, of all the groups of people in the world that still are very similar in some ways to the cultures of the past is the Amish. They use these fish for part of their diet. And he talked about how he and his wife will soak the fish in salt water. And I said, well, we often soak them in milk. But they soak them and then they bread them and so forth. I want you to remember that for years and years through the history of fishing, fish were kept and they were eaten. And so I want to go back to my own childhood because I think this is a really important thing in terms of why fishing means so much to me. And I've told you many, many times that when I was a kid, you never thought of throwing a fish back. You put it in your creel, you brought it home, you showed it to your family, you showed it to your parents, and they said, oh, what a good boy you are, and you felt great. And then you cleaned the fish. But I got to tell you, we relied on the fish that I caught and the birds that I shot in hunting. That was part of our diet. We ate fish day after day, and I know the DEC will tell you that's a terrible thing to do, but I grew up eating fish, even for breakfast, having trout, and all the rabbits and grouse and ducks and geese and squirrels that were part of our diet as well. Everything was used, and it was not just used for the sake of using it. It was used because it made up a big part of how we ate and how we prospered. I mean, I can't say that we were poor. We certainly weren't rich. I got hand-me-down clothing from my older cousins when I was a kid, but I had a life that was so fantastic. And part of that life of being a child is about who I am today and why I try to share this with you. So, you know, when we think of fishing, when we think of the resource, and we think of what it once was and what it has become today, because today it's become more about the sport and less about the need, less about the food that it provided. But there was a certain sense of not only accomplishment, but in my case as a kid, of joy in being able to bring home that food that was part of our table. And I think it's important, even though that might not have been part of our upbringing, it might not be a part of anything that your family has ever enjoyed, it's a part of the tradition in the history of fishing. And I never lose sight of the fact that fish are a valuable resource in so many ways, and they can become a big part of our diet. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.